That is a beautiful sweet potato. That's the kind of yield that we need. Guten gardening, everybody. Today I'm going to be harvesting the sweet potatoes from our long raised bed. It's actually our longest raised bed that we have here at Guten Gardening. It's a 32-foot long bed. Now half of this bed, so about 18 feet, were taken up by 3 different varieties of potatoes. We've already done that harvest. They did quite well. The other half of the bed is where we grew 4 different varieties of sweet potatoes. So we have Centennial sweet potatoes, some red Japanese sweet potatoes, some white Triumph sweet potatoes, and then some Georgia Jet sweet potatoes. Now I was just talking to a gardener yesterday who commented that he noticed that a lot of sweet potatoes seem to take forever this season to really get going, to get that growth going. And still they're seeing some decent success. Well, that's definitely, especially in this bed, something that I noticed. For our white Triumph especially, it seemed like they just were not taking off. They never really gained that vigor that we'd like to see. So we'll see what this harvest looks like. I should say one more thing. Our root stout bed is on the other side of this bed. The potatoes there were not really affected by voles. The potatoes at this end, the other end of our bed here, of this raised bed, were not affected by voles. So what will that mean for our sweet potatoes here? I guess we're going to find out. So we're going to start down here on the end with our Centennial sweet potatoes. I'm going to notice here there are a few weeds growing in here, but this mix is something we really shook up last season when we planted this whole bed with sweet potatoes, and I don't think last season we had fertilized it quite enough, and so we struggled with some of that performance. Now we'll see if we did a better job this season. You can still see how dark and damp this is, and that's because the last couple of days we got 2 inches of rain. That's a lot of rain. We could have used a lot of it earlier in the season. But I'm going to show you one thing right here. This singular Centennial sweet potato slip only grew this much. Now most of the other ones here are a good bit bigger, but that to me is a sign that whatever's underneath here for that first sweet potato is going to be kind of tiny. I can feel it right down in here. We're still going to make this our first sweet potato out of here, because regardless of the size of the slip or regardless of the size of that initial sweet potato, we want to see everything. We want to show you everything down in here. And you see that white root right there? That's actually from our tomato plant next door. And we planted, once again, just like we did last year, we planted some tomatoes right alongside our sweet potatoes. Okay, here's our first sweet potato, a tiny little thing, but I don't really think that that one slip is going to be indicative of everything we get out of here. In fact, I'm pretty confident it's not, because everything else should be. Most of these other slips are a good bit bigger, and I can already see here, right underneath here, that this is a much nicer sweet potato. This slip has a good bit more size to it. Let me see if I can indicate some of that here. This is a vining variety. The Centennial is a vining variety. These aren't massive sweet potato plants, but definitely a good bit larger in here. And that's why we're seeing this one's the same size, but this one, which is a nicer sweet potato. Let me detach it here, and then we'll pull it out. That is a beautiful Centennial sweet potato. I'm going to say something about Centennial sweet potatoes, and if you've grown them and you've really loved your experience with your Centennials, you let me know. But so far, for as popular as Centennial sweet potatoes are, for as common as they are, especially here in the US, we have not seen a massive quantity produced. I know they're delicious, but I need to see a whole bunch this size or bigger before I sit here and say next season we really want to grow Centennial sweet potatoes. There are so many varieties that produce well for us or have produced well for us in the past, so that's one of the things we're depending on. We're depending on these sweet potatoes producing well. And this is not bad, so don't get me wrong, I'm not going to complain. No vole damage so far. And these, especially this one, that's a beautiful size. One of the things we've experimented around with a little bit this season is some drip irrigation. I think that might have helped a little bit. We got a Bluetooth timer now, so that's something else that we can start to work with, is timing out, and especially if we leave for a period of time, timing out when the irrigation happens. This is another pretty nice one. So that's something for us to look at for a bed like this. You know, the sweet potatoes really do like a good amount of watering, and I don't necessarily know that they got everything they needed. One of the things we have to work on for this particular bed is continuing to add perlite, continuing to make it so that it has better drainage. Let's see if I can pull this up. Oh yeah, they're detaching the whole way. If they don't get enough watering, one of the things that happens is you end up with a whole bunch of sweet potato fries, and you just don't get the roots plumping up the way we'd like to see them. That being said, this one definitely has more. Actually, the last one had quite a few smaller roots that you could see would have become some pretty nice size sweet potatoes if they had been able to develop fully. Okay, I've got another one down in here, but I kind of think it's not attached to this one. Yeah, this is attached to the plant next door. So we're gonna wait to pull that out. So I'm curious, how often do you water your sweet potatoes? How often do you find yourself coming out to water yours? Have you noticed a difference when you're growing sweet potatoes? If you're not getting out here, getting enough watering in, do you notice a difference in terms of production, in terms of tuber size, if you just allow everything to be dependent on whatever you're going to get naturally? There you go, that's nice. There's one of the things that I know is, it seems to me, okay, you tell me, I say I know, but it seems to me that the seasons have gotten drier of late. I don't know if I'm 100% correct on that, but that's what it seems like to me. And so if we have to come out and water more just to counteract that, then that's exactly what we'll do. That's what we'll have to get used to doing. Hey, these are pretty nice coming off of this particular plant. We got some pretty nice ones there. Nothing majorly big, but what I'm going to say about this, and I want to make it clear, I said already that I was struggling a little bit. Let me get way down in here. I was struggling a little bit with the overall production for these Centennials. I'm seeing plenty on here. Now it's just a matter of confirming or making sure that what we're getting is big enough. Now I like those single serve sweet potatoes. Like, that's a single serve sweet potato. That's nice because that's a one person sweet potato. You throw that in the oven and you'll be able to eat the whole thing, no problem. But I want all of them to be about that size. Here's another one that's going to be a nice single serve. Look at that. That's beautiful. I tell you what though, so far, knock on dirt, so far down here, the voles have stayed away. And if you watched our harvest last season, you'll know it couldn't have been farther from the case in this bed. They found a way in and they just took advantage of it. We had black plastic down, try to keep things warmer. I don't know if that attracted them even more. We didn't put the black plastic down this year. We didn't put any covering. So, I don't know, was that the difference maker? What I do know is I've seen plenty of voles. We had a sweet potato harvest where voles abounded, and I thought that was going to set the tone for all my sweet potato harvests this season, and it didn't. It hasn't set the tone. I have noticed that the sweet potatoes have been a little bit smaller. There's a couple of beautiful worms coming out because the soil's so damp. I've noticed the sweet potatoes have been a little bit smaller, but I've said it in other videos and I'll repeat it right now. I'll take whole, healthy, smaller sweet potatoes over giant half-eaten ones any day of the week. Now down here at the very end where we have this is our white cherry tomato, I planted 3. They're right up by the tomato plant, and I'd say they got shaded out a little bit by the tomato as it grew. So I'm expecting to get a couple, maybe like this. Whoa, this is a long one. Whoa. This is going to be maybe our longest sweet potato, but not much to it, but hey, that'll be a couple of French fries, right? A couple of sweet potato fries. So we get the longest one there. I don't expect to see too much size out of these last couple, but every little bit counts toward the harvest, huh? And as much as I didn't speak too fondly in terms of overall production of this Centennial variety, for us, they're still very, very delicious sweet potatoes. So yeah, maybe we could use more, maybe they could be bigger, but they're still delicious. So I'll take as many as we can get. All right, we're going to move on to our next variety of sweet potatoes, and here we have some Japanese red sweet potatoes. Now, one thing I can tell you is I'm working my hands through the soil mix here. It is definitely on the cooler side. The temperatures have dropped enough to where the average ground mix is below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And for sweet potatoes, once they get to that lower temperature, you're going to see a reduction or a stoppage in growth. And so it doesn't really make sense to keep things growing once it gets this cool out, or once the soil itself gets this cool. Now, as I'm digging through here, the first thing you're going to notice, I think, is that the size of these sweet potatoes, well, they're not massive. And I've said this once already, and I'm going to show you here. We've got a decent bunch here, but again, not too much size. This one's not bad, but in general, this bed was the one I was most worried about. And why was I most worried about this bed? Because it was a bed where we struggled really early on to get these plants to take. And what I mean by that, they wouldn't establish themselves as we were going through the process at the beginning of the season. They just struggled and struggled. And so when I look at the harvest here and the size of these plants, I mean, that was a tiny plant for a sweet potato variety that's supposed to be vining. I should be seeing 5, 6, 7 feet in any direction of vining, not 2 feet. And so it's not surprising to me that what I'm seeing come out of here are these single size, personal size sweet potatoes or smaller. I mean, some of these are going to be sweet potato fries. Basically, that's all I'm going to get. I'm going to scrub off the skin and then just eat them as is. Otherwise, I'd lose half of the value in these sweet potatoes. Now, then we get to one like this where it's bigger, the vines grow out more, and I get a nicer sized sweet potato. I mean, that one in the middle there, pretty nice. I should have 3 or 4 that are this size, though, out of each of these plants. All right, as I look at this, I think this is our last of the Japanese reds here, and I'm seeing a decent number here that are a decent size, but again, nothing major. One of them looks like it's starting to sprout a little bit. There you go. That's the last of those Japanese reds, and we move on to our white Triumph sweet potatoes. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've harvested these white Triumph sweet potatoes in a multiple different beds now, and you can see the size of that one. You can see the size of the ones that I'm going to pull out of here now, like this one right here. And that's about as big as they get. That's what I've seen. And when we talk about picking different varieties of sweet potatoes to grow, and the decision making that goes into deciding which varieties we keep, we try to grow again next season, we talk about taste, absolutely. But we also talk about production, because I'm not trying to plant sweet potatoes that are just growing sweet potato fries. We've made that mistake before, where we've just grown sweet potatoes too late in the season and they haven't performed well. But this variety, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like it works well for us. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I mean, the Hannah, as a sweet potato that is a whiter flesh, that variety, that has done really well for us in the past. This, definitely not so much. Actually, this sweet potato here, which I just broke, is the biggest white Triumph I think we've harvested this season out of these beds. And so, again, this is a variety that I think isn't long for growing in our garden. We may try again with slips that we start from one of these sweet potatoes next season, but I don't intend to spend too much time with these white Triumphs. One thing, though, I like how the leaf shape of those white Triumphs differs so much from the other sweet potatoes here. It's got a 3-pronged type of leaf. I think that's pretty cool. Well, this is the last of the white Triumphs that we pulled out of here. A couple more of decent size. Again, we're not going to get a ton of food. All right, I'm going to call this last variety my favorite of the 4 varieties that we planted in this bed. And this is our Georgia Jet sweet potatoes. And I gotta tell you, when it comes to production, and you can see this one actually has a little bit of splitting. The last week or so, I mentioned we had about 2 inches of rain prior to this harvest, but we get a little bit of splitting. But this sweet potato variety, for taste, absolutely delicious. For shape, I love it. It's that rounder kind of shape. And for overall production, we've typically done quite well with Georgia Jets. That's something that I think is important to note. Again, we pick varieties, we keep growing varieties that we've succeeded with in the past, and this is one of them. Now, I'm not saying each one of these is massive, but what I am saying is that as we're pulling these out, I'm seeing some better production, certainly than I just saw before. And if you take a look at this one, and this is one of my favorite parts of harvesting sweet potatoes, is getting in here and excavating a little bit, pulling it aside and seeing, exposing what's underneath the surface. And this sweet potato, well, that's a beautiful, beautiful sweet potato. That's something that I would love to have 20 and 30 and 40 of those coming out of here. But what I'm seeing is that's really, in this case of this bed, that size potato is in the minority. Now, that being said, here's another really nice one that I'm exposing. And this one seems like, as I'm clearing out around here, that it's going just down and down. This has got to be the biggest sweet potato that I pulled out of this bed this season. That is a beautiful sweet potato. That's the kind of yield that we need. And so again, that's one of the reasons why we grow this variety. This is a variety that has been consistently productive for us, and so we feel more confident, we are more confident that we're going to get better results from varieties that we've done well with in the past. Now, when it comes to our zone, our growing zone, part of growing these different varieties is learning which ones fit a Zone 5 garden the best. I mentioned that 60 degrees soil is something that we'd like to have, 60 degrees plus, in order for them to grow successfully. And so when we're talking about Zone 5, where the soil temps take a little bit longer to heat up, but they cool off a little bit faster, meaning that we don't have that long of a growing season. I would say it's about a medium growing season. We have to pick sweet potatoes that can handle these temperatures. But I would say that out of all of the varieties of sweet potatoes that we grew this season, the one that performed the best in this bed was the Georgia Jet, and that's the one that is definitely guaranteed a spot in next season's garden. Well, I think it's pretty clear to say that this bed underperformed, and to be fair, out of all the sweet potato harvests I plan to do this season, this is the bed I was the most concerned about. Certainly our Centennials and our Georgia Jets outperformed the other 2 varieties. Actually, I'm going to say the Georgia Jets produced some really, really nice sweet potatoes. Those are absolutely stunning. They'll make for some good eating. But we've got to really get in here and amend this bed. We've got to add and make this a much, much better, more well-draining bed. That's just step 1 in the process. Our potatoes did fine. I think we can do even better. I like the fact that we did half potatoes, half sweet potatoes. We might switch it up next season and flip the sides that we do that. But I thought that was really fun and a really good place to take this bed. But we got some work to do on this one. Hey, you know what? Every harvest is its own adventure, and I certainly enjoyed this one, even with some of those smaller sweet potatoes. And I'm excited to see what we can do with this next season. Hey, if you enjoyed today's sweet potato harvest video, do us a favor. Don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.